Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. I don't know if you can hear the buzzing, but there's a chainsaw going out in the neighborhood somewhere today. So we had a windstorm a couple of weeks ago, took a lot of trees down. So this morning, as we come together, it's Mother's Day. We're celebrating Mother's Day, and first of all, we want to wish a happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers who are hearing this, and to all of our mothers and their mothers and their mothers. I was sorting through a box of old family photographs last night. Some of my cousins asked me if in my mom's effects, if I might have had any pictures of their dad. And as I was sorting through looking for that, I came across a picture I didn't know I had. And it was my mother, and her mother. So my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother. The three of them in one picture, and I didn't know I had that, and it was just precious, remembering each of them. So as we come together this morning, we have to recognize that this day can bring up for us very joyful, very happy, very kind and loving emotions and feeling. And it can also bring up sadness for us. Sadness in that for many of us, our moms have already passed on. And we miss them. We miss them. Even though we know that they have not died, they have moved to a new experience, and someday we will join them. But we miss them. We miss their smile. We miss their touch. We miss their voice. We miss them, and it's okay. It's okay to grieve. It would be strange if we didn't, as what Dr. Holmes tells us. So if you're feeling happy and you're feeling sad, it's okay. We're human beings. For some of us, we miss the opportunity to experience our mother's love. Maybe our mom died very early in our lives. Maybe we were adopted. Maybe our mom was unable to give us the kind of mother's love that we're talking about today because of issues, her own issues that she was dealing with. And that's okay too, because moms are human beings. And we love each other in our humanness. We love each other, as David Letterman's show used to say, in our stupid human tricks. So what we want to know is that this unconditional love, this mother's love that motherhood itself as an institution symbolizes, that we can still experience that. If we did not experience it as children growing up, we can still experience that now. Because that love is the very love of God. It is the very presence of God. It is the complete, unconditional love. That's what we're seeking. That's what draws us to this day, to this idealism of motherhood. And of course, we may not be able to experience through that one person, but we can experience that love. And just remember, it's that love that we're seeking, and it is that love that is seeking us. So we want to talk a little bit about motherhood in general, and then the unconditional love of God for us. Because one thing that helps me in my journey is if we start to look at everything in our lives, the people in our lives, the circumstances in our lives, our own life, if we start to look at things as if they are symbols, what do they represent? What do they stand for? What is it that is behind this thing? Then we can, I believe we can experience it more deeply. You've heard me mention that in the Hindu temples, they have different statues of many different gods. I grew up in a Catholic church. We had statues of many different saints. In the Hindu temples, they have statues of many different gods, and they look strange to us, to our culture and to our way of thinking. Some of them have a head of an elephant. Some of them have many arms. And it's because they stand as a symbol for something. They represent something else. So I was reading a book by a Hindu teacher, and he said, if people believe that this plaster is somehow a deity, if that's their level of thinking, that's okay. That's where they are, and that's okay. If they think that this piece of plaster is a symbol of a deity, and the deity looks like that and acts like that, that's okay. That's where they are. But if they come to understand that all of these things are just concepts, mental representations of the one, of the divine, see, then that's even better. That's even better. So wherever we are on our journey, wherever we are is okay. But I think if we can start to come to examine the things in our lives as symbols, what does that represent? What is that all about? What does that represent? Then that draws us closer to what we are looking for. Now, in the beginning, as in the opening treatment, in the beginning, there's this complete unity, this complete oneness. There is no experience of otherness or separation. But as creation evolves, as the divine in Eastern traditions, as the divine falls into the material experience, into the conditioned or conditional experience, the human experience, this idea of separation creeps in. And it is necessary. It is necessary for us to develop as individualized expressions of the divine. It is necessary for us to forget for a time this oneness, this unity. But the remembrance of it, see, the remembrance of it is always there. Always there. I think our spiritual growth is remembering. We're remembering the unity. It's there. See, there's something within us that resonates, that rings to it. I told you the story of Vernon Howard wrote a book called Psychopictography. Vernon Howard was a minister down in Atlanta some years ago. And he was talking about the power that the image holds, that this is why teachers teach in parables, The story, the image that the story gives to us is something that we retain long after we've forgotten the words. And he gave the story of this little boy who was kidnapped by a band of gypsies, passed through his town and took him away, and he was very little. And when he became a young man, he was able to break away. He was 17 years old. He was able to get away. And he decided to go back to his home, to his hometown. He didn't know where it was. He didn't know the name of it, didn't know how to get there. But he remembered the sound of the church bell, the sound of the church bell. And what he did was he walked across Europe from town to town, and he listened to that bell, to the church bell in that town, until one day he was coming up over a hill. And he couldn't see the village, but he could hear the sound of the church bell down in the valley. And it rang true, and his heart quickened, and his pace quickened, and he ran to the top of the hill. And when he got there and he looked down into the valley, he knew he was home. He knew he was home. And what Howard tells us is that there is something within us that already knows, that already remembers. It's kind of foggy, it's kind of distant. But there's something within us that remembers that unconditional love of the singularity, of the unity, and is that which we are seeking to get back to. And in this world, in this experience that we have here on earth, motherhood represents that unconditional love to us better than any other example that we have. It permeates different religions, it permeates different teachings. If you read the email last night, I mentioned that if you look back in history, if you look back through mythology, we tend to have religions that had goddesses or feminine gods, and we have religions that have masculine gods. And the goddess religions tended to be the religions of the people who worked the land and raised the animals. These were people who worked in the harmony of God's nature, Mother Nature, Mother Nature. They could see how everything related. They could see how everything worked together for the highest good. The coat of many colors is a symbol of divine harmony. Honey is a symbol of divine harmony because the bees work together and they draw the pollen from many different flowers. And the symbolism is there. See, the symbolism is there. But the hunter-gatherers, the nomads, the warlike people, they needed a different God. So you human beings tend to create God in our own image instead of the other way around. And they needed a God who would give them permission to steal, who would give them permission to take, to kill, to pillage, and to plunder. And they had male gods, warlike gods. And in those religions, God is kind of like the king, like a Middle Eastern king, someone who gives people permission to go attack the neighbors and steal all their stuff and bring the goods in. And and of course what happens is the goddess religions were more pacifist religions. They weren't into fighting, they were into harmony, but the nomadic religions were warlike people, the religions of warlike people. And of course when you bring a pacifist and a warrior together, the pacifist is going to lose the physical battle every time. Not the spiritual battle, but the physical battle. So as the male-dominated religions overtook the goddess religions, they tried to wipe out the feminine, and they couldn't. As hard as they tried, the symbol of the Madonna and Child persists. It is still there. Okay? In Christianity, we have a painting of Mary with the child Jesus on her lap. And I'm sure you've seen it and it comes to mind. But that painting, if you go back even further, it is depicted in the Egyptian religions of a statue of Isis with Horus, her son Horus, about the same size, about the same age as the painting of Mary and Jesus. Here's Isis and Horus. So this symbolism of mother and child, of motherhood, it is so strong, right? It is so strong that even attempts to write the importance of femininity, of women out of the scriptures did not succeed. And just to give you an example, if you want to do a little research, look at the history of Mary Magdalene in the Catholic Church and the Christian Church. And in some Gospels, Mary Magdalene was the very first person Jesus appeared to after the resurrection. But in later Gospels, that became Peter. The role that Mary Magdalene played became diminished. In some Gospels, she is a great apostle and a leader of the early church. And in other teachings, she became a repentant prostitute, which there's absolutely nothing in the scripture that would give credence to that. But about the 6th century, somebody decided that that's what she was. So the only reason I mention that is that despite the best efforts of people to change things around, there's something so powerful of the symbol of mother and child that it cannot be erased. It cannot be erased from our spiritual growth because, to my way of thinking, it represents that which sent us and that which is causing us to seek and that which we are seeking, which is the experience of the unconditional love of God. So Dr. Frederick Bales in our teaching. Dr. Frederick Bales gives us a beautiful example of God's love for us, as demonstrated in the way that our body and our mother's body are almost one. Not quite, but almost one, as we are developing in the womb, you know. I mean, think about this. We don't have to breathe. We don't have to eat, because our mother does that for us. We get our oxygen from her blood. We get our food from her blood. We grow inside this perfect environment, perfect for our development. There's an intelligence that guides that development every step of the way, you know. The sperm and the egg split, and half of each come together and make a new cell, and then 2, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16. And some cells become clear, and they become eyes, and some become hard, and they become bones. And some become the heart, and some become the lungs. And it's just perfect. Everything happens as it should. See? When it should and how it should. And since we don't need to breathe air because we are getting oxygen from our mother's blood, our little lungs are able to move the fluid in and out and strengthen themselves, so that when we are born, they will be able to receive the gift, the air that has already been given for them. And in the process of birth, as our little bodies move through the birth canal, they are squeezed so tight that all of the fluid comes out of our lungs, so that as our little chest enters the world and it pops open, expands, we are able to suck in and breathe the air that has already been given. So Dr. Bales gives us this example, and he says if we can just think about how this process of our little bodies developing within our mother's body, how perfect it is, then it reminds us of how perfect God's love is for us. Every detail has been worked out. See? Everything in its perfect place at its perfect time. And yet we must consider that as close as that physical relationship between us and our mother, the closest physical relationship we will ever have with another human being, as close as that relationship is, God's relationship with us is even closer. Even closer. For while our mother's body cares for us, allows our own little bodies to develop. It is perfect in every way. It develops the food that we need to eat as soon as we are born and we know how to eat. As close as that is, our life is not our mother's life. Our mother's life is not our life. But if we consider God's relationship to us and through us and as us, it is even closer. It is even closer than a relationship with our mother. So on the physical level, just on the physical level, if we think of the biology of what is going on, and then move beyond that biology into the symbolism, see? Into the symbolism of what it represents, we see that motherhood is a perfect symbol to remind us of just how magnificent God's love for us is. But if we move beyond the physical, if we move to the emotional, if we move to the feeling nature of the relationship of mother and child, we get an even stronger example, a more potent example of the love of the divine for us. For a mother's love, motherhood represents unconditional love. Unconditional love. Mothers love their children. They love them unconditionally. There's nothing they wouldn't do for their child, even giving their own lives so that the child might live. We see this examples throughout history in tough times where there wasn't enough food to go around, that the mothers would feed the children and they would go hungry themselves. They would take what material they had and they would make clothes for the children, even if they didn't have enough to make new clothes for themselves. That love of protecting and caring for the little one, that mother's unconditional love. I've told you this story before, I know, but for me it kind of represents this unconditional love. The program I was watching, we were doing a prison ministry years ago, and I was kind of interested in prison reform, prison ministry, and those sorts of things. And I was watching lots of programs and reading lots of books about that. Which, by the way, if you're interested in that, the Mennonites have the best material out there, the best programs out there. But this one program that I was watching, they were interviewing a man who was in Caledonia in North Carolina, a prison camp, and he was there for life. And they asked him what he regretted most about being in prison. And his answer surprised me. He said, well, he understood that legally he deserved to be in prison. He did the crime, he was convicted of the crime, and he was serving his time, and he understood that. And he said over time, he said his wife divorced him, and he understood that. She needed to be free to go on with her life. So after a year or two, he lost his wife. He lost his relationship. He said, and then after a few more years, his kids stopped writing him and visiting him, and he lost his family. They too had to move on with their life. And he understood that. He wasn't bitter about it. He said he understood that. It hurt, but he understood that. He said, but his mother never quit on him. He said every year on his birthday, he got a card from her. And he said his greatest regret, the thing he regretted most about going to prison, was that he took his mother with him. He took her to prison with him. See, moms don't quit. Moms don't quit. No matter what he did, he was her boy. And she loved him. In my own life experience, in the neighborhood that I lived in, there was a lady who was a friend of the family. And I guess when I knew her, she was in her 60s or 70s at the time. And she had an adult son who went to prison. And I don't know exactly what it was that he did, the circumstances of it. But I think in 15 years, he had to serve 15 years before he would be eligible for parole. And in order to do whatever it was that he was going to do, whether it be a parole or appeal, I can't remember. It doesn't seem likely it would be an appeal with a time frame on it. But whatever it was, in 15 years' time, he was going to need the transcripts of the trial. And the transcripts of the trial were $1 a page in those days. This would have been in somewhere in the 60s, I guess. So she knew that he wasn't going to have the money in 15 years in order to get the transcripts that he needed in order to take this next step in his legal process. So what she did was she went out and she borrowed enough money to pay $1 a page for the transcript. She put it in an investment fund. so that it would continue to grow year over year. And she went back to work. She had already retired and she went back to work, I think as a secretary. But every day she got up and she walked to the train station, got on the subway and rode it into Manhattan. We lived out by the beach area. So it was about an hour into Manhattan. And every day she got up and she went to work. And she took her paycheck every week and she used it to pay down that loan. She figured that in 15 years' time she would be too old to go to work if she was still alive. But she wanted to make sure that when that day came, that he would have the money to do that. Now, the story has a sad ending in that what happened is the boy, who was actually a young man, I guess he was in his 40s at the time, he broke out of prison. He broke out of Sing Sing in New York. He and two other guys, and they murdered a police officer and went right back to prison for the rest of his life. And she died shortly after that. I think it just broke her heart. She had been working, hoping to secure a future for this boy. And it was gone. It was gone. But that's a mother's unconditional love. That's a mother's unconditional love. She will do whatever it is that she can do, whatever it is that she needs to do for her child, no matter how awful the child might be, no matter what terrible things the child might have done. The mother will love him. In Christianity, we're given the example of Mary, the mother of Jesus, and the unconditional love that she had for him. The first public miracle that Jesus performed, according to the scripture, was the wedding feast at Cana, where he turned the water into wine. And if you read through that story, there's more to it than the changing of the water to wine. But this is where she releases him to his public ministry. This is where his mother tells him, these people need wine. And he says, what's it to me? What's it to me? Now, there's a little bit of history there. So in those days in the celebrations, the guests took turns buying wine for everyone. And it came around that it was his turn to buy the wine. Also, historically, if you go back, there's another event in religions of the world that predates that, and that was a celebration of the Canaanites, where they celebrated the rain because the rain made the grapes grow and grapes turned into wine. So all of these things are kind of mixed together. But the point that I want to draw here is that this was his mother commissioning his public ministry. She was saying, go do this. Go do this. So it was the end of their lives as they had known it. His being the oldest son of Joseph, when Joseph died, it was Jesus' responsibility to care for his mother. That's the way that society was set up. And she knew that, but she told him, go do what you got to do. Go do what you got to do. Our lives will be different, but go. Go. I'm not going to hold you back. Go. This is a mother's unconditional love. And at the very end of his life, when all of his male followers had run away, except one, John, and we have his word for it that he was there. But she was there with him. She and Mary Magdalene were there with him. She wouldn't run away. She loved him unconditionally, even to the point of watching him suffer. She was there to offer whatever aid, whatever comfort, whatever love she could. She was there. So we have the example of the emotional bond of the mother and the child, And in Buddhism, I'm going to read a little bit from a Buddhist prayer at the close here today. The Buddha says that we should love each other as a mother would love her only child. How simple How precious. Can we love each other as a mother loves her only child? So physically, we are closer to our mothers than we are to any other human being. Emotionally, we are likely closer to our mothers, or at least motherhood represents to us that close emotional bond of unconditional love that says, no matter what you've done, no matter what you're going through, I am there. I am with you. I am at your side. You'll always be my child. I will always love you. And what that points us to then is the unconditional love of God in our lives. The unconditional love, And I say that because in our human experience, a conditioned experience, a conditional experience, everything seems to be tied to something else. I love you because you're a member of my family. I love you because you're a member of my country. I love you because you're a member of my faith. I love you because we have exchanged vows. Everything is conditional. See, everything is conditional in this world as we know it. And yet God's love is unconditional. Can we take the because out of that? I don't love you because. I just love you. I just love you. And the experience of love is the experience of unity. When I say, I love you, can we understand that what I'm saying is, I feel one with you. I experience oneness with you. I experience the very presence and activity of God in you and as you and through you. And this is what I recognize as love. Now I realize that as we are growing, see, we don't necessarily think of love in those terms. We think of love as transactions. We think of love as roles. We think of love as responsibilities. But as we grow spiritually, we come to understand that love is beyond all of those conditions. That love is itself unconditional. So this experience of oneness, this experience of unity, if this is the ideal of love, if this is the perfection of love as far as we know it, as far as we can go, right? So we can only go as far as we know, and once we get there, we may know more. It's kind of like sailing to the horizon, You sail to the horizon that you can see. And as you move towards it, you see another, and then another, and then another. And this is, to me, this is how our spiritual growth unfolds. But if we think that, excuse me, if we consider that what we recognize as love is truly the experience of oneness, and as our idea of love evolves, it evolves from the conditions of family or countrymen or kindred souls and all those things. It expands to everyone and everything because we are all part of the same whole. Then we must bring ourselves to a complete understanding of God as perfect love. And the scriptures tell us this, right? If you don't know love, you don't know God. God is love. God is love. Because God is one with everything. It has no sense of self and other, is the way that the philosophers would put it. It doesn't know that you and I are not it expressing its life as us. Many teachers use the example of the wave in the ocean, and I like that. The wave is the ocean expressing itself as the wave. But the ocean doesn't know that the wave is not part of it. But imagine if the wave could develop a sense of individual identity and say, hey, look at me. Here I am, sticking up high, rolling along, and the ocean's just laying there flat, you know. What happens when the wave loses that ego sense of self and recognizes that it is one with everything? You and I are one with everything. As all of the waves are connected through the ocean, we are all connected because we are all part of the same. Another example I use is if we took a black curtain, put black curtains over all the windows in the middle of the day, and we blocked out all of the sunshine, and then took a little pin and we went through that curtain and we put little pinholes all through that curtain. If we looked on the floor, we would see little dots of light as the sunlight streamed in through those holes. And we might look at those little dots of light and we might think that they were all different and separate. But if we consider it, we come to realize that they are all just simply expressions of the sun. That there's one light, and it appears to be many, and out of the unity comes the multiplicity. So now we can start to consider that the relationship physically that we had with our mother's bodies, the emotional relationship that we have with our mother's love, is nothing compared to the intimacy of the relationship that we have with God, because there is no separation. There is no separation. In fact, there's no we. There's no I. There's no you. There's no us. There is God. There is God. Nearer than our hands and feet. Closer than our breath. What is it that created our hearts but the love and the activity of God? What is it that beats our hearts but the love and the activity of God? And out of what did it create our hearts but out of itself? Out of itself. The undifferentiated energy of the universe became matter and form, and fashioned that matter and form into these bodies that we have. If we truly get that, there is no separation. Where did the life come from that animates these bodies? It is some part of the divine life. Just as the dot of sunlight on the floor is some part of the one sunlight. We truly, if we contemplate this, we start to let go of ideas of separation. We start to let go of our ego. We start to let go of our selfish desires. We start to let go of everything that is not like unconditional love. Unconditional love. And as we contemplate motherhood, as we contemplate Mother's Day, as we contemplate those in our lives, those people in our lives who have represented unconditional love to us, whether male or female, we understand that we are contemplating God's unconditional love for us. And this is why I said at the beginning that even if our experience in life, in this life, in growing up, excuse me, even if our experience did not live up to the ideal of motherhood, this kind of glamorous or perfect idea of motherhood, even if our personal experience does not meet that ideal, which it probably doesn't, right? Because all of our moms are human beings. We can experience that unconditional love still. we can experience it now. We can experience it here because it is our very nature. And we experience that by going within, right? Go within. Go in secret to your prayer closet. Go within and seek the kingdom. The kingdom that we are seeking is the unconditional love, the experience of the unconditional love of God. And that is within us. It is within us. It is like that little boy running and hearing the bell ringing and saying, yes, yes, yes. It is within us. That which we are seeking has caused us to seek. That which we are seeking has given us symbols along the way that we can look at and we can say, yes, yes, yes. But ultimately we learn to go within, to make our counsel with the divine, to experience the divine motherhood, which is already here, which has created us out of itself, which never has left us and never could leave us, which cannot give up on us, will not give up on us, which is totally unfazed by any of our stupid human tricks, and just loves us unconditionally. So we celebrate moms, we celebrate Mother's Day, we celebrate motherhood, we celebrate unconditional love, and we celebrate the presence and the activity of the divine in us, as us, through us, and in all people. And now we go back into the world and we demonstrate that unconditional love, that mother's love to everyone we meet. We love each and every one as a mother would love her only child. And that comes to us from Buddhism. So I'm going to close today with a reading from a Buddhist prayer. And it's called the Metta Sutta, which is also called the Heart Sutta. And this is just a little prayer that people can consider every day. If you don't remember it as I read it, you can find it on the internet. The Metta, M-E-T-T-A, Sutta, S-U-T-T-A. And to me, this represents unconditional love. This is the work of those who are skilled and peaceful, who seek the good. May they be able and upright, straightforward, of gentle speech, and not proud. May they be content and easily supported, unburdened, with their senses calmed. May they be wise, not arrogant, and without desire for the possessions of others. May they do nothing mean, or that the wise would reprove. May all beings be happy. May they live in safety and joy. All beings, whether weak or strong, tall, stout, medium or short, seen or unseen, near or distant, born or to be born, may they all be happy. Let no one deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none by anger or hatred wish harm to another. As a mother watches over her child, willing to risk her own life to protect her only child, so, with a boundless heart, should one cherish all living beings. suffusing the whole world with unobstructed loving kindness. Standing or walking, sitting or lying down, during all one's waking hours, may one remain mindful of this heart and this way of living that is the best in the world. Unattached to speculations, views, and sense desires, with clear vision, such a person will never be reborn in the cycles of suffering. And that's the Metta Sutta from Buddhism. And to me that represents the ideal of motherhood. And so it is.